Hello and welcome to our latest webinar, Sustainability Goals, How to Power Change Together Through Partnership. I'm Catherine Metters and I'm joined today by Oliver, Victoria and Hugo, and I'm going to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves.
Sure, thanks, Catherine. I'm Victoria, today joining you from the Netherlands, and I'm the European Sustainability Manager at Fellows.
That's great. Thank you, Victoria. And Oliver, who is from Climate Partner, who is a partner of Posturite.
Good morning, everybody. Yes, I'm Oliver, working for Climate Partner. We are in business to facilitate a net zero world. What we mean by that is helping businesses to calculate their carbon emissions and do their climate risk assessment, and then crucially move from reporting to impact by decarbonising and supporting climate technologies around the world. I'm looking forward to sharing some examples.
Thank you, Oliver. And last but by no means least, Hugo, our own CSR manager at Posturite.
Yeah. Hi, morning, everyone. Yes, my name's Hugo Youngman. I am head of CSR. I guess that is, I guess I am really, but I'm also head of marketing. So that's, but I'm pretty sure that in the future, I think I know what's going to take precedence. So glad to be joining you all.
Thank you very much. Right, I think without further ado, we will let Victoria speak and let us know what she has to say. So over to you, Victoria.
Thanks, Catherine. I think we can move on to our first slide. And we can start by acknowledging that sustainability is not an easy task. There's a myriad of words and even more acronyms that can leave us feeling very confused about what to do, when to do, and how to purchase. So the way we found to deal with all this complexity is by starting with a really solid foundation. Like, what is this all about? What are we trying to achieve? And in our next slide, we can see something that is probably familiar to many of you. Can we move to the next one, please? Thank you. And those are the UN Sustainable Development Goals. These are the famous 17 very colorful goals that set up the ambition of all the countries in the world of our planet from 2015 to 2030. Some of those are qualitative, but a lot of them are quantitative, and they have targets in terms of reducing poverty, hunger, percentage of people in education, protection of marine areas. These goals are to be achieved by the different governments in every country, but we will talk about how businesses and also us as consumers can contribute to those. In the next slide, we can see a bit of a different model, which is from the Stockholm Resilience Center, and it's called the wedding cake model because it's layered. We can see that the goals related to the environment are at the bottom, about the ocean, water, and land, and it's a good reminder that we need the environment to be prosperous. Next up, we have goals related to social issues such as education, hunger, gender equality, peace, and we also need healthy and well-functioning societies to contribute to sustainable development. And last, we have goals related to economy because we want to live in prosperous societies. And here we talk about consumption, about growth, and about infrastructure. And finally, at the top of the cake, we have the partnership, which is the main topic of our webinar today. So in the next slide, we'll be talking about how all of this can be translated and the relation between the governments and the businesses. On the sorry for the complex slide, but on the first row, we can talk about reporting obligations. So as a business, we are being mandated by different legislations to talk about what the company or any organization does in relation to sustainability. We can see the EU CSRD, which is a bit of the hot topic now, and even more so the CSDDD. Lots of letters in here, but there's upcoming and already approved legislation in the US, both at federal level and at state level, for example, California, and in other places in Asia, such as Singapore. So governments are already asking companies to disclose, to report, what are you doing in regards to sustainability? What can businesses do to meet those obligations? Well, some of them were already doing it before those legislations came in, and we have different instruments or standards to be reporting. Some of you may be familiar with the CDP, or maybe some of you are members of the Global Compact, and I will just highlight the EcoVadis because it's really pretty, especially with the Olympics having taken place this year, and you can get a bronze, silver, gold, or platinum medal. So it's another way to communicate what the company is doing in terms of CSR. Aside from talking about the companies, and this is also related to our topic today, we can talk about the products we purchase, the products we use, the products we dispose of. And there's also legislation on that side. You can see some of them on the bottom left corner in terms of the carbon border adjustment mechanism, deforestation, eco-design, and there's both EU and upcoming UK legislation there, plus in other parts around the globe. And then the counterpart, what are businesses doing to prepare for those legislations or to already advance those requirements? Well, it's all about understanding the impacts of the product and understanding how to make them more sustainable and communicate that in a transparent manner. So one of the options are the eco labels, and those might be very familiar to you, FSC or PFC for forest products, Blue Angel, very well known in Germany, Nordic Swan from Scandinavian markets, or the EU eco label. But aside from those eco labels, it is important to incorporate like sustainability requirements in product design, because at the beginning, at the inception of design of a new product is when we have more opportunities to influence the sustainability aspects such as reparability, durability, recycled content. So a lot of work to do, both in terms of organization and in terms of the products. In our next slide, we were asked, what is the trend of sustainability? Where are we going? Where are those partnerships happening? And my key takeaway is that the trend is data. And those partnerships have a lot to do with the data exchange. The first lesson learned or takeaway for today is we never have perfect data, so we can start with accurate with estimates and slowly improve the accuracy. And this data refers to the topics we were discussing before, to the products, for example, a life cycle assessment of the product, but also about the organization, how much water you consume, what is your carbon footprint, and we'll hear more about it from the rest of the panelists. The other part where data is important for the partnership, because the data is not static. Our customers are requesting the data, the end users, the consumers want to know about the sustainability aspects of the products and the companies they're buying from, and we need the help of our suppliers to be able to collect this data, gather, assess, impact, improve. And finally, because the world of sustainability is becoming more professionalized, and Oliver will tell us all about it, verification is an important part. Consumers are asking more for verified data, and it can be about the product. And here's where those eco labels we were discussing about can play an important role, but also about the claims, also about the organization's footprint in terms of carbon or water. So if you don't know where to start, data is a good place to start. And I'll leave you one last slide, the next one, which is how do we tackle all those complex problems? And it's probably not too dissimilar from the way you would tackle any other issue or topic to improve in your organization, from increasing the retention rate of your employees or reducing costs in a warehouse. First, we identify what the problem is. We need to measure where we are right now. We define a target, and we just action an improvement plan to bridge the gap between the current performance and the target performance. And in these green bubbles, you can see an example from an organization that not everything needs to be done at the same time. So let's imagine an organization, a university, a company that it's only just starting to think about biodiversity topics because they're not sure what their impacts are or what they need to do about that. But for example, they're already measuring water consumption, but they don't have a target. And in carbon emissions, they are measuring and they have an actual target, but they haven't started thinking about the action plan. But for example, in terms of air pollution, which is one of the most heavily regulated ones, they've already had the target for years and they're already working on the improvement plan. So different points of the journey, different speeds for different topics of sustainability. We don't have to do everything at the same time, but we have to work on the ones that are most impactful. And with this, I'll pass it along to Oliver.
Thank you, Victoria. And I think really powerful talking about the sustainability journey and the different aspects that can fall into sustainability. And what I'm going to do is go through some different sustainability strategies, who's doing them well, and where the learnings are. So hopefully we'll all tie in nicely. So if we can move to the next slide, please. So yeah, we're going to look at how are companies setting and meeting their goals. And let's start with why they would do this. So firstly, law. If you are a listed company, you now need to publish your scope 1 and 2 carbon emissions. The SECR, that's your streamlined energy and carbon reporting. The clue is in the name. It's not a plan to reduce your carbon. It is reporting, but it is a start in terms of measuring emissions. Then we have the CSRD. Victoria mentioned this. This has arrived in Europe. This is a broad framework that requires EU companies to report on a wide range of environmental, social, and governance topics. And in the UK, we have the equivalent coming along soon, the sustainability disclosure requirements and the sustainability disclosure standards. These are very similar. So if you are a listed company, or crucially, if you supply to a listed company and you're part of their scope 3, they will soon be asking you for this information, if not already. So that's to get us started. Next slide, please. Secondly, it's working with the public sector. So public procurement is driving hundreds of thousands of companies to calculate their emissions and set a reduction plan. Posturite are one of these companies, and as part of their sustainability strategy, they have published a carbon footprint and a carbon reduction plan. Interestingly, the requirements become more stringent over time. So whilst you need to begin with quite a light carbon footprint, it does become more intensive. You have to include your product's carbon footprint, and you have to start looking at your entire scope 3, which includes your supply chain, and eventually setting your own net zero goals. So this is driving a huge increase in climate awareness by many SMEs. Next slide, please. Thirdly, ESG is now directly relevant to a company's value. So this is from the Boston Consulting Group, who did an evaluation of ESG in private equity. But we can see what they're saying here is that funds are at the forefront of the application of ESG in private equity. And when they are, they see significant financial returns from their investments, including stronger sales, lower costs, higher employee engagement, and ultimately superior value. So if you are seeking investment or finance, or you're a business looking for an exit, ESG is now a key factor in how your business's value is evaluated. So it's crucial for a responsible business. Next slide, please. Okay, we're going to talk about voluntary reporting and accreditations. Victoria touched on this, but we have the Carbon Disclosure Project and EcoVadis. These are reporting. They are really important platforms for businesses to showcase their positive work and allow consumers and businesses to make conscious decisions. There are well over 100,000 companies using CDP and EcoVadis. They are fantastic platforms. B Corp is more stringent, and crucially, when businesses become a B Corp, they make a legal commitment to consider the impact of their decisions on all of their stakeholders. So that's a business embedding sustainability within its covenants, within its values. Now, what I want to reference here is that accreditations and labels, they can become complicated. You know, B Corp has been going for many years now, and it's in a process of enhancing its standards to make sure that its benchmark is high enough. And of course, various existing members are concerned whether they can achieve these new standards. And of course, businesses that have the accreditation also sometimes come under scrutiny. So, for example, Brewdog is quite a well-known B Corp that was criticised for having poor workers' conditions. So having the accreditation doesn't necessarily protect you, and they require consideration. What was good enough yesterday is not necessarily today, and that's a fantastic thing. Sustainability will keep evolving and developing. At the bottom of this slide, you can see the carbon neutral label. This is something that Climate Partner used to offer. That meant that a business had calculated its carbon emissions and had offset them. Still a fantastic thing to do, but on its own, it's no longer best practice. We need to build on that, and businesses now need to be calculating and reducing their footprint and then offsetting. So you see the concept keeps evolving, and it's businesses such as us that have to be driving best behavior. Please do still seek out carbon neutrality. It's a great thing to do. You also need to be reducing your footprint. So you see the concept keeps moving. Next slide, please. Okay, so some companies just do their own thing, and this is really to be encouraged. The example I want to share, next slide, is the co-op. The co-op wanted to support peatlands across the UK. They recognized that they could do this by funding through sales of compostable carrier bags in their stores, raising £1 million per year that they share with the Royal Society of Protection for Birds, who protect peatland. They're not making a claim. There's no label. They just saw this as something that would align with their customers, align with the UK, where they wanted to have impact. And they recognize that the UK needs help here. We have potentially 3.2 billion tons of carbon stored in our peatland, and 80% of that is degraded. And if we don't give money to supporting that, we could be emitting 20 million tons of CO2 per year. So this is an example of a business really just doing their own thing. There's a great reputational boost and message to share through that. So you don't need to follow a prescriptive route. But moving on, there are prescriptive routes to help businesses, especially SMEs, that don't have the resource of co-op, and following the recommended path to keep the planet beneath 1.5 degrees of warming. So next slide. This is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, giving guidance about setting net zero goals. And this aligns with standards such as the Science Based Targets Initiative. We encourage all businesses to do this. This is what we need to do to keep the world beneath 1.5 degrees. You'll have seen just recently that the forecasts are that we're currently heading for 3.2 degrees. We've seen many climate issues recently, from Spanish floods to Amazonian droughts. The issues are here and now. So we need all businesses, whether you're a large business or an SME, to be following this. And there is guidance from it. Next slide, please. What it involves is setting reduction plans, carbon reduction plans. And here are some examples. So Tesco's, they clearly have a lot of properties and assets around the UK. They've signed a power purchase agreement. It's a solar park in North Kent. It's the largest solar and battery storage project ever constructed in the UK, with 560,000 solar panels, a capacity of 373 megawatts, and it will generate enough renewable power annually to meet the equivalent of 144 of their largest stores. So they've made a big commitment there to renewable energy. Fantastic. And that would be their scope 1 and 2. A.S. Watson, this is one of our customers. This is a large retailer in Asia. It's similar to a Superdrug or a Boots. And they've provided their supply chain with education. Firstly, education. You need your suppliers to understand why this is important. And then incentive. and the tools to calculate and reduce their carbon emissions. And this is across many markets, many abstract markets in Asia, with different languages, different levels of resource, different levels of climate knowledge and awareness. And AS Watson is saying, hey, we're going to get out there and provide the tools so that all of our suppliers can start having impact. And then finally, Heineken, they are incentivizing their barley farmers on regenerative agriculture. So what the aim there is to lock more carbon in the soil, bolster watershed and soil health, promote biodiversity, essentially lowering the carbon emissions of the barley so that they can get closer to creating a net zero beer. And I think that's something we can all support. So those are examples of businesses investing to decarbonize. Next slide, please. Let's talk about some top achievers. These are businesses that are really pushing beyond and really driving fantastic impact. So highest levels of ambition include circular economics. They include revolutionizing your products and how you engage with your consumers, and having a substantial commitment to impact outside of your value chain. Similar to what Co-op were doing, how can we have impact in the broader planet? It's not going to necessarily affect our business directly, but we think it's the right thing to do. The example I like to share with circular economics is Decathlon, fantastic pioneer in circular economics. Their head of sustainability is a chap called Chris Allen. He does a lot of podcasts. You can check him out. They sell a lot of bikes, and they had three lines. They had their budget bike, their better bike, and their best bike. And they recognized that their budget bike is very high sales, but also high disposal rate, making a lot of waste. So they said, okay, we're going to remove our budget bike from our offering. And instead, what we're going to do is invest in repair and refurbishment skills, train people, get in the tools so that we can start buying bikes back from our customers, starting with Decathlon products, but they hope to extend it to other designs of bike, refurbishing them, and then selling them as their new budget bike. So that's fantastic. It creates an entire new business line, but in repurposed products rather than high volume, high waste budget products. Next, I want to talk about is Patagonia. Oh, sorry, back to that slide. Yeah, Patagonia. Their number one customer is the planet. They're very vocal about this. Therefore, their entire approach is only buy this product if you need it, and if it breaks, we'll repair it for free. Pretty cool. And finally, Microsoft, who have a carbon price. This creates a fund that they then invest in new climate tech. What we mean by a carbon price is that anything that they purchase within their business, there's a carbon tax applied to it. And with the funds raised, they've signed a 10-year carbon removal project with Climeworks, where they're essentially investing in direct air capture. And this is essentially getting finance to new emerging climate technology. So these are all examples of very bold moves. And the most ambitious strategies really do consider the environment in parallel with their goods and services. Moving on. So greenwashing. Greenwashing is a danger, and it comes from making sustainability a PR campaign. Greenwashing is linked to claims, and what we want to really communicate is that sustainability is about far more than what you're talking about. It's what you're doing. So be conscious of that and focus on your action. The Competition and Markets Authority, they have gone after many businesses for misleading claims. The one I'll share is Oatly. They were told that their claim was misleading. They said that the dairy and meat industries emit more CO2 than all the world's planes, trains, cars, and boats. And obviously they are, trying to take market share from the dairy industry. And that claim was just too big. You couldn't quantify it. You couldn't work out the numbers. And the CMA said, look, you're misleading consumers. You have to take this down. So be careful about what you talk about. Make sure that it has substance and that it's directly understandable by consumers. All claims will come under scrutiny at some point, Do you need them to support your actions? Moving on. Here are some examples of claims that have backfired. All of these businesses have made bold environmental claims or sustainability claims and backed away from them. Unilever, perhaps the most public at the moment, they've scaled back on their environmental and social pledges. So they've gone for more virgin plastic. They've moved away from their living wage. They've moved away from their diversity spend. And they had a disabled workforce goal, and that's now been ditched. So don't make these claims if you can't then back them up. That's the most important. A few other examples in there. The last one, quite interesting. The UK government was defeated in court for having an inadequate net zero plan. So, no business, no body is safe from this. You need to have substance in what you say. It's a fantastic thing that you will be held accountable. Just think carefully about what you talk about. Next, please. There is guidance, there's plenty of guidance. Follow the IPCC's guidance on the mitigation hierarchy. So you start by measuring and reducing within your own value chain, and you then move beyond it. You need to set realistic goals, and upon all else, explore the difference between claims and action. Worry less about claims. The days of saying we're carbon neutral are gone. We're now saying this is what we're doing and this is why we think it's important. Moving on, please. Okay, what prevents companies from taking sustainability seriously? Well, knowing where to start. It is a challenge and it takes time and resource. My focus is very much climate, so looking at carbon and climate risk and the supply chain aspect of that. But there's many different things. There's health and safety, there's diversity, equity, inclusion, there's modern slavery. So it can be very overwhelming. But it's about deciding what is material to your business and where should you start. Takes time and resource. And seek guidance. Many industries have net zero alliances. Many consultancies offer support. You can educate your existing staff. You can build your teams. Hugo was marketing, but has now added CSR to his skill set. So it's about finding the resource and the support to make it happen. Moving on. So yeah, we'll flip it into why you should start and what is the value. Where is the opportunity to inspire, and focus on where you can have impact. You may have a very complex supply chain. It's gonna take time to change it. It's gonna take time to work with it and set a reasonable action plan. An example I'll share: customer of ours, Lidl, they've set a net zero plan, and accordingly they need to start engaging with their many thousands of suppliers. One of those, Duncan Farms, a producer of eggs. We worked with them. We did a carbon footprint of a 6-pack of eggs, and we recognized that a lot of emissions were unnecessarily coming from their feed, which was produced in South America. It was coming from soya, so carbon intensive. We switched it to a local feed, a UK-based feed that came from regenerative purposes, and that reduced the carbon footprint of a 6-pack of eggs by 57%. To be honest, it's one of the greatest results we've ever had. 57% is fantastic. We don't expect that to happen with every business. But the point is that Lidl identified hotspots in their supply chain, and they started engaging with them. And that's where you then have impact. Moving on, please. So, how ambitious should you and your company be? It's a complicated space. It really is. But the planet requires significantly more ambition. You'll be hearing at the moment in the papers that the COP summit is happening right now, and these are our governments getting together trying to drive action because the planet requires more ambition, but we cannot wait for our governments to set agendas that are going to take too long to filter through. There is also rapidly changing consumer knowledge and habits. Businesses want more sustainable products. There are now 130,000 EcoVadis rated companies, 8,500 B Corps, and 5,500 companies have set science-based targets. It's a growing movement, and being part of that movement is increasingly important for businesses to have value and reputation. There are also many others that have set their own actions and goals. That Co-op example. There are many others out there. Sustainability is for most companies currently voluntary, but this will change and regulation is coming. Think about the positive impact you have. Is it comparable to the output of your goods and services? Can you do even more? And get ahead, reap the rewards of being a market leader, become climate change resilient, and provide a product that resonates with today's world. Beyond all else, I implore you to champion action, inspiration, and innovation. Thank you very much. I will now hand over to Hugo.
Hi, so I am basically my two luminaries people, I'm just making some comments.
Sorry, Hugo, I'm having trouble hearing you. I don't know whether anyone else is.
Is that better? I
Much
think that's
better,
better.
thank you.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so if Tom, if you could just flip on the slide one. Okay, so this is where most companies are. This is where kind of we are really, and it's obvious that we want to reduce harm using fewer resources while maintaining productivity in terms of eco efficiency. And this is really blindingly obvious. So, for instance, Posturite, we've reduced our pallet locations by 25% in the last 6 months with the implementation of a new stock system. So everyone wants efficiency, but actually what we should be aiming for is eco effectiveness, which is creating systems that actively improve the environment and society. So we are a 30-year-old established business, and it is quite challenging putting those systems and processes into place, but we need to rethink, we need to reuse, and we need to upcycle in every single eventuality. The second more general slide I have is around carbon tunnel vision. So we are required to provide our carbon emissions to various companies in the client world, and that's great. But there's so much more we can do in terms of looking at sustainability. Oliver's example about the co-op and the RSB partnership is so interesting because there's no claim that they can make, but there's a huge reputational boost around liaising with the RSPB and maintaining peat bogs in Derbyshire, wherever it is. So again, it's about doing the right thing, but it's about doing the right thing within your business, in your locality, and not getting too hung up on carbon emissions, although they are super important. Okay, so this is where we started really, and I'd like to think that we had a position of leadership in sustainability, but I'm not quite sure that's the case. I think we do a good job, certainly, but we need a certain amount of certifications that are required to do business, a certain amount of gateways to go through, and my feeling is that we are obligated to do certain things by either our clients or by regulation. So that's a great position to be in. I think we're making strides in this area, but it is a challenge. And then, as the other presenters have alluded to, the certifications that were required take time and resource and are bureaucratic in their nature, which means we take less action and we spend more time filling in forms, quite frankly. So we've got to pick our battles in this emerging market. And where did we start? Well, we started in 2022 by baselining our scope 1 and 2 emissions, which on the right-hand side you can see is emissions directly from our site here in Berwick near Respawn, and the electricity and emissions that we buy. Okay, those two things for us are quite easy to do, and I see a lot of companies doing those. the elephant in the room, as it were, a terrible phrase that, but is scope 3 emissions. And as we'll see on the next slide, that is a minefield. We have a lot more credibility as well in corporate and social responsibility in terms of contributing to society via our employees and associations, which again I think is a very good positive reputational thing, but ultimately, when it comes down to scope 1, 2, and 3, the position is slightly more nuanced, I think. Next slide. And so this is how we've started. We've tried to break down what we do into bite-sized things which we can handle as a company and go forward with. So as I say, our scope 1 and scope 2 emissions are fairly easily understood, and we've made a commitment to reduce those. When you get into scope 3 in terms of upstream activities and downstream activities, this was our first year. So this is what we did and didn't measure. So we did measure waste generated in operations, business travel, employee commuting, and the packaging associated with our purchased goods and services. But you can see that if purchased goods and services, if we're only measuring packaging, that is a very small measure of the whole implication of all those products coming from, I don't know, Poland or China or whatever else. So that's a big challenge, and we'll see how we've broken that down into the more important areas of our business. That's definitely the way to go forward. The other progression that we've made from this particular slide is that from this year, we'll be measuring transportation and distribution in terms of getting in, I think it's about, actually, I don't know, it's 140 suppliers, but getting in all our emissions from the products that are coming into our warehouse in Birmingham. And then on the right-hand side, our downstream activities, which is transport and distribution, which is taking all those products and sending them to our clients. Okay, and that's, I think the transport and distribution on the downstream activities is something like 120,000 points of data. So it's a massive thing to do. And for a business like ours, we have to re-engineer our computer systems around trying to get that data. So it is challenging, but it will be worthwhile because once we have those measurements, then we can start to take action. Next slide. Okay, so the challenges in scope 3, I rather like this diagram because, as I say, scope 1 and scope 2 are manageable, but scope 3 is a bit of an iceberg, maybe a reducing iceberg. But anyway, so challenges in scope 3 is robust data because we're dealing with data that's coming from outside our company. There's the complexity of the supply chain because we're dealing with 140 suppliers. There's a lack of standardization in terms of EPDs, environmental product declarations. So different companies are requiring different things, and we'll talk a little bit about how we can cope with that in terms of a holistic life cycle assessment. And obviously the whole product life cycle needs to be addressed. So as I say, the solution to this is to break scope 3 emissions into smaller focus areas, backdate it to a baseline, and then start to take action on it. Next slide. And then the product cycle. So breaking the cycle, and this is a very simple slide in terms of we've always operated within this kind of linear economy, which is take, make, use, and lose. And quite obviously the market is moving to this circular economy, but that's exactly what it is. It's not starting, it's almost starting at the end. It's starting with the products and the materials that are in the marketplace at the moment, not being mined or anything else, and using those to recircularize and design new products. So the circular economy is a much more holistic way of looking at the marketplace. And next slide, just a couple of examples. And this is one of the most sustainable companies we deal with. And to be honest, they do a great job, Flock. They're a Norwegian producer of chairs. But even within their ecosphere, they're only producing an EPD, an environmental product declaration, that deals with the product stage and the construction stage. So you can use, I know it's faded out on this diagram, but the use stage, the end of life and beyond the system boundaries, they don't actually measure those yet. It's coming, but at the moment, people are generally looking at the product stage and the construction stage and saying, how can we design better products? How can we get them out to the marketplace in a sustainable way? And then once they're out there, we just kind of wave goodbye to them. But as I say, this circularization is on the horizon and coming very quickly, I believe. Couple of things we've done. So this is a footrest. Footrests, honestly, they're pretty standard items. But this is designed with 100% recyclable materials. It's 100% recyclable packaging. It has a 5-year warranty. The secret for us is to introduce this in a way that educates the customer to say that this is a much better product to buy than the previous incarnation of plastic footrest that we had. Okay. Next slide, please. And then this is another product we've introduced this year, which is a Go Eco Air laptop stand. Bit of a mouthful, but again, sustainable timber, low environmental impact, 100% recyclable materials designed for disassembly. Now, the company that are producing this are very small, so they can't make any claims around this product. They can't afford to get all these wonderful certifications. So in this case, it's a question of doing the right thing and also trying to understand what the customer will buy, because these products, because they're produced in lower volumes, are kind of more handcrafted, so they are more expensive, and we believe that people will want to make that investment going into the future. A couple of other things we're doing in liaison with our parent company fellows, we are introducing life cycle assessments for all our products based on some of the legislation that's coming down the pipe from the from Europe. Okay, so we will have to assess the whole life cycle of every single product that we have. That's going to take a huge amount of time and resource, but obviously it's worth it because everyone that can then be transparent around the impact of a particular product. And it's really interesting what Oliver said about bringing feed in from a certain place from A to B that will obviously produce a huge amount of emissions. It's the same for us. If we can resource a product to Eastern Europe rather than China, then the implication is there's less carbon emissions in getting the materials in the first place, transporting it to the UK, and then distributing it. The second thing that we're doing, which we're introducing next month, is we're introducing a second life of product. So we had some specific problems to Posturite in terms of returns and refurbishment. And so we are introducing a pilot program, which is launching next month, as I say, which is refurbished chairs in particular of high selling volume lines. And we are repurposing them, we're cleaning them, and we're producing them as new to put back into the marketplace, because we understand that certain government organisations, and this is Europe and not necessarily the UK, but it's coming, are mandated to buy a certain amount of refurbished product alongside new. So that's a really important development. Those products can be purchased more cost effectively than new product. And obviously there's the sustainability element to those products, which is so laudable, I think. Next slide, Tom. And then just a note on our corporate and social responsibility. So we have an award-winning partnership with the Stroke Association. We centralised our charitable donations to the Stroke Association because we believe it's a really important charity. We had a target of £50,000. We raised £75,000 over 2 years. So it was really, really positive. And it's given the company a focus and a challenge to support a charity that is one of the 4 most widespread diseases in the UK. Obviously, we also do an awful lot. Well, not obviously, we do an awful lot of work around apprenticeships, diversity and inclusion. We have a new health and well-being, not society, that's the wrong word, but we also have ethical governance, sound business practice. So I think we do an incredible job in terms of social responsibility, which again is about doing the right thing rather than making claims around our sustainability metrics. Okay. So just in summary from me, I think the obsession with carbon data masks everything else that we need to be doing the right thing on our own locality for our own businesses that support sustainability. 100% actions speak louder than words. If we can take more actions, then we're not filling in forms all the time. And then the last thing is that we're in this together 100%. We visited a foam manufacturer some time ago who'd done an incredible amount of work around the sustainability and the nature of their foams and how they were bought and how they were manufactured. But they said to us that if we don't link up the supply chain, if we produced an unsustainable cover for this particular product, then the whole thing was lost anyway. So we need to share best practice as we go forward. And again, 100%, I believe one of the things that Oliver said, which is that ESG and the advent of sustainable finance will be beneficial for companies. If not now, then going into the future, 100%. So thank you very much. And I think I'm handing over to Catherine.
You are indeed, and I'm hoping that our poll results are going to be coming up. But I have to say that was absolutely fascinating. I mean, I'm passionate about the environment, but actually I've learned so much just listening to that. And I think it can feel overwhelming, but actually listening to our three speakers, feeling actually that we can empower in our own ways and that sort of thing. So no, really exciting. So let's have a look at the output of the poll. So the question was, what is your organization's motivation for tackling sustainability? Oh, intrinsic. Isn't that wonderful to see that it's high, that people actually believe that companies intrinsically want to work on this. Then followed by legal compliance. Yes, I mean, I have a background of health and safety. Legal compliance often drives things initially. Customer demands, that's good to know that that's up there. And then we've got the other issues of part of being a supply chain, which we heard is driving change for us all. So that's good. And then recruiting and retaining employees, I mean, at 14%. So lots of reasons, but isn't that great to see that actually the will to try and make changes there and it's intrinsic. So that's fantastic. So can I invite our speakers to be back on screen? Because I've got a few questions, some of which we received in advance. And I'm also hoping that we're going to get some more questions from people listening to us today in our Q&A box. But I think I'm going to start off with a question we got in advance, which was, what does sustainability have to do with health and safety? I think perhaps that kind of, Victoria, do you have a view on that?
Sure. I mean, sustainability has to do with a lot of the decisions we take, from health and safety to education to the food we purchase, the clothes we get. So it's about introducing sustainability as one of the criteria when you make decisions. Are you going to buy a product? Are you going to contract a service? Can I look at the sustainability credentials? Or as Hugo was saying, can I choose the products that have the more eco labels or the published information of the LCA? So it's embedded in the rest of the considerations.
That's fantastic. Oliver, do you have a view on that?
I do, yes, because I feel that sustainability it's sort of moving over a time frame, and it's important to assess, if we take it from a climate perspective, the risks that may be upcoming from a health and safety perspective with a changing world. We've seen what's just happened in Spain. So how is a changing world, whether it's climate or other, going to affect your business? The other one that's very apparent at the moment from a health and safety perspective, it's current litigation. A business called HelloFresh is being taken to court by its ex-employees who had disputes about working conditions. So this all plays into the health and safety conversation. It is not a dissimilar conversation to a general sustainability and ESG governance aspect.
Yeah, they're very, very much, as I say, I come from a health and safety background. It's nice to see that everything all is coming together to sort of some common goals, really, isn't it? Which is fantastic. We've had a question in. Do Posturite provide a lease scheme where you can rent specialist kit and return it when no longer required, or get it fixed if it breaks? Just thinking of the circular economy model. Now, myself and Hugo sit with a group that looks at products and ideas. And although I think at the moment we don't have a lease scheme up and running, I think we've got some things in the pipeline. Hugo, are you happy to share some of the things that we are trying to bring forwards at the moment, even if they're not quite ready yet?
Yeah, so I think that certainly in as much as our major product areas go, we are introducing a scheme for refurbishment, and we do have a what's the word? Evolving the warranties department within Posturi and the way that we've treated that. Well, the warranties department is new as of the last 8 months. So we are dealing much more in refurbishment in terms of spare parts, in terms of looking at people's products and maintaining it in the workplace. I absolutely love that question because I do believe that a lot of companies will be moving to a lease scheme. And I don't speak from personal experience, actually, because I can't afford them, but there's a Swiss trainer brand called On, and they have a lease scheme that means you get 4 pairs of trainers a year. They're a ridiculous cost at the moment, but it's just circularized. And I love that scheme, and it's lease. So you're paying a fee a month. And I think there's a lot more cost cost strategies that will come into play to the marketplace that will give more variety rather than this kind of interaction of buy, sell all the time.
I think actually the word lease is probably going to evolve, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
certainly leasing, I remember in days gone, you used to lease your television and that sort of things, and then that was a very different concept to maybe what we're talking about now. So I think that the terms may change, but I think it is an exciting time to see us reusing, recycling, and looking at different ways of doing that. So I would encourage people to sort of keep an eye on our website and some of the webinars we're doing as we try and launch things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, while I've got you, Hugo, I've got another question that came in advance. How can small businesses find meaningful ways to act on sustainability despite a small team and budget? Because I mean, we are still a relatively small company, so.
Yeah, and it's to companies that are smaller than ours indeed. But I think it's all about your local environment and what's management in your circle of influence. So there's basic steps that you can take. So reducing energy, turning off appliances, minimizing waste, sourcing responsibly, all these good things. So all these things are kind of proed up to big companies, but we can still take action on a local level. It just depends what's manageable, depends what your ambition is, and depends on the reputation of your company. Because if you set it out as being sustainable, I think that's a massive boon in this emerging market.
Yeah, I think I took quite a lot when Oliver was talking about some of the small things that were just the right things to do, even though they perhaps weren't weighed and measured in the same way. But then we also looked at our poll result that said that doing better was intrinsic. So actually, the two go hand in hand, don't they? Of looking, even if it's small ways to nudge everything in the right direction, is worth
Yeah.
doing, even if it doesn't meet the big sort of administrative heavy things, really.
Yeah, listen, there's one thing that we will do next year when our contract runs out, which is at the moment, I don't know whether it's contentious or not, but we are told that the energy that we buy for head office is renewable because it's from Drax. So I don't know if you know, but Drax burns wood pellets. Okay, so I can't see that that's sustainable, but the government provide a lot of subsidies. But next year we have the opportunity to change. Now that's not going to make any difference to our missions or whatever, but I see it as doing the right thing. So these are the choices that we have on the table.
And it's good to have a discussion around those things, isn't it? And just what is right for us and
Yeah.
right for the future, really. Right. How can public sector bodies be accountable for not working towards net zero goals and making the investments required? Victoria, do you have a thought on that?
Sure, and this is a very relevant topic. We've recently seen litigation in several countries, where both in the US and in Europe or at a state level, where private citizens or NGOs are suing the government for not meeting those net zero promises or objectives. But at the end of the day, there's an opportunity in terms of advocacy, which is us as consumers or citizens with our vote, and as businesses with our power of influence, the associations we belong to, we have an opportunity to engage at different levels of the government. And it can be just with your council, or it can be at a wider level or a national level. And I think, speaking personally, because I've lived in different countries, when I was living in the UK, I was really impressed by the opportunities for collaboration that there are between the public sector and the private sector and the consumers, a lot of grassroots organization. So I think the channels are there, but it can be frustrating when certain things need to be addressed by the government, for example, infrastructure. And then as citizens or businesses, we have limited room for maneuver.
No, I agree. Oliver, do you have any thoughts on that one?
I do, yes. So, I echo what Victoria says in that advocacy is so important for you to influence public sector wherever you can. The UK is doing a lot of good. I mean, just this week at the COP agreements, the UK announced we're increasing our net zero targets, our near-term targets, from 78% to 81% decarbonisation. So this is fantastic leadership that the UK is showing. And in my earlier slides, I talked about public procurement and how the NHS and the Crown Commercial Service are driving so much positive impact. So there is a lot happening, but as an individual or as a business, we vote with our wallets as well, and every pound you spend is a vote for that business, is a vote for that action. So think about how you are consuming, how you are transacting, because all of it is a signal further up to a business that either is or isn't being more sustainable than one or other.
Thank you. I mean, I have to say, I've sort of signed up to my local council sort of feed, and actually sometimes they do ask for opinions, and I have added opinions that perhaps I wouldn't have done a couple of years ago. So I think there are opportunities for all of us just to make our opinions heard of how our public sector bodies are representing us. Right, we just got actually really a comment come in just saying that somebody was pleased to be able to get an ex-demo chair from Posturite. We do try very hard that where we have, products that for some reason can't be sold as perfect, that we do make them available. We don't throw them away, or we try and put them into sort of recycled again circular. So I'm glad that somebody has managed to sort of benefit from that, and I hope we'll have other initiatives sort of coming through as we go forward. So I'm conscious of the time, so it'd be nice actually for me to be on time for once. I'd like to thank everyone for being here. Thank you, Victoria. Thank you, Oliver. Thank you, Hugo. We will be getting that email out to everybody today who registered for this webinar, and you'll have a link to a recording if you want to pass it on or you want to listen again. We won't be doing another webinar until January. We're just finalising our programme for next year. So please look out for an email from us. And apart from that, I think it's for me to say thank you to everybody and goodbye.